Hello and welcome. My name is Nelly and this is my first formal sit down video, and let me tell you, I always took for granted how YouTubers did this because this is so weird and so like confusing. I'm like, oh, I don't know where to sit. I don't know what's gonna look good. But anyway, today we're gonna be doing my January wrap up. In January, I read technically 8 books, 3 novellas, but 2 of the novellas were over 100 pages. So I'm just putting it all together like Goodreads does and saying 11 books. So the first book I read this month was Lady by Midnight by Tessa Dare. This is the 3rd book in the Spindle Cove series and probably my 3rd favorite in the series. The first 2 were definitely the best, and the first 2 and the 3rd one actually, all 3 of these had the best characters in it, in my opinion. So it was my 3rd favorite in the series. I did end up giving it a 4 stars. I gave the first 2 4.6 stars each. I did really enjoy it. I really love Captain Thorne and his little group of friends, which is what the first 3 books are pretty much based on. And I really just love the characters and everything Tessa Dare really writes. So yeah, I didn't really have too many complaints about it. It just wasn't like the greatest. And I've read other books by Tessa Dare as well, so like I kind of know where I'm standing, but I did really enjoy it. The second book I read this month was Beauty and the Blacksmith by Tessa Dare. This is the 3.5 book in the Spindle Cove series. This is the first novella I read for the year, and it was one of my favorites of the year so far. I gave it a 4.5 stars. It was so fun. I think the 0.5 was kind of taken because of the whole novella thing. You didn't really get too much of like the whole build-up story, but I really did enjoy it. Especially the last scene was great. The last sex scene, because I don't remember how many sex scenes there were. I think there were 2, may have been 3, but the last one that they did was gold. It was amazing. Would highly recommend this book. I normally don't do the novellas in her stories, so the Spindle Cove has 4. I didn't read the first one, but I read this one. I also read the 3rd one, and then the 4th one comes out this year, and I'm not gonna read that one. So it kind of just depends on whether you want to. It doesn't really add anything to the story. It's just a little bit of background, because they might mention, oh, you know, that thing that happened, and that happened in the novella. So if you hadn't read the novella, you wouldn't know. But it's not important to the story at all. The 3rd book I read this month was Any Duchess Will Do by Tessa Dare. This is book 4 in the Spindle Cove series, and this is when my liking to the series started to kind of drop. I do think a big part of this was due to the audiobook. I listened to all of these on audio because I just really like the way they're done, and this audio was done so well. This narrator did it so well that she picked up the accent of our girl. So our girl is just a common folk, and the Duke chooses her as a way to get revenge on his mom so that he doesn't actually have to marry. And the narrator did her job so well that you can tell she's a common folk, and I think normally I wouldn't have picked up on it like that. Like I wouldn't have done the accent in my head the way she did. So it made it so much more authentic, but also like kept pulling me out of the story. I feel like an asshole saying this, but I did not enjoy that. I will say though, the actual Duchess, the Duke's mom in the story was hilarious. I really enjoyed her character. But I did end up giving this a 3 stars. It was still good. I did still enjoy it, but there was a lot of dips for me. The next book I read this month was Lord Dashwood Missed Out by Tessa Dare. This is book 4.5 in the Spindle Cove series. You could tell I was on some sort of a kick. And this is actually the first one where literally it doesn't have anything to do with anyone else in the first 4 books. So you're meeting this woman who wrote this little pamphlet of Lord Dashwood Missed Out. And she ends up meeting Lord Dashwood. So like they had known each other when they were younger. They end up meeting again, and it's their little romance. This book was so funny. So funny. I will say you have to read book 4. You have to read Any Duchess Will Do to read this one, because this one was broken up into the Lord Dashwood part and characters from book 4. So it kept cutting like into scenes where you back with characters for book 4. So you do have to have read book 4 to read this one. But I would highly recommend it. I will say having the characters from book 4 was a little annoying at times. It's definitely necessary for the way the story was going, but it was a little annoying at times because I was having such a great time with I don't remember their names, the 2 characters from Lord Dashwood, that I was like, no, I don't want to leave. But I would highly recommend this one for sure. Oh, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5, like 4.5 out of 5 stars. The 5th book I read this month was Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. This is the 5th book in the Spindle Cove series, and it is the final book in the Spindle Cove series. In this one, you're following Charlotte, who is the sister of 2 characters that you meet earlier in the series, and she's now away from Spindle Cove, and her little relationship, it was, I think, the weakest one within the entire series. I did end up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars, but I do think it was the weakest one in the entire series. The entire book was pretty much based on this one mystery of some people were heard doing it, and now they're trying to figure out who it is so that they don't have to get married. And first of all, I guessed it pretty much right away, but they kept going on different directions. I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's not that, but I guessed it pretty much right away, and it just wasn't well done. I feel like the entire book was technically a mystery, but it just wasn't executed entirely properly, and I felt kind of bored at times reading it. I do think it was a fun read. I just don't think it was anywhere near what Tessa Dare normally writes, which was a little disappointing. The next book I read this month was Mine Till Midnight by Lisa Kleypas. Now, again, I read this one over audiobook. A lot of times for Regency Romance, I will do it over audiobook. Sometimes I won't, but most of the time, I just Libby that and I listen to it. And they're always done so well that it's a great time. So in terms of this book, I really enjoyed the big family aspect. You'll see this again soon. I love big families. I'm one of 4 kids, which isn't the biggest, but I still loved growing up in it, and I think any more siblings would have just been great. I really liked Cam in the story, which is the gypsy, which was also really different for me. I was like, oh, a gypsy. I was not expecting this. Mind you, I never read synopses when I go into a book, so I really go into them blind. But I really liked him, and I really liked how naturally our 2 main characters got together. It wasn't like love at first sight. It wasn't, you know, I hate you kind of thing. It was kind of just like naturally, you know, they liked each other, so they started getting together. Although Cam was a little bit Regency man in the, oh, we have to marry kind of thing. And she was more spinster. She was like, nah, I'm not trying to marry. But still, they didn't put up too much of a fight. It was still just a natural coming together, which I really did enjoy, because sometimes it's just a little annoying when they're just fighting it so much. It's a little too unrealistic. I will say that if you know anything about me, it's that I hate love triangles, and there was a character introduced. His name is Christopher Frost, and he gave me so much anxiety, not because I was actually scared that she might like him or anything, but because I didn't want to have a love triangle. Like, I wanted to avoid it by any cost necessary, and I'm so glad that happened. But the little mystery that happened with Christopher Frost, I pretty much guessed right away. I was like, oh, okay, I think I know what's gonna happen here. I'm not gonna say it, but I was pretty accurate. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy it. But I think for Regency Romance, for it to get a 5 out of 5 stars, it has to be like top tier. I haven't really given very many Regency Romance books 5 stars, but it has to be like top tier. I know what I'm looking for. So the next book I read this month was, you guessed it, a novela, and that was Warlord Shadow by Frost K. This is the prequel to the Armenian Feuds series. Although I don't know why this was classified as a sequel. On Goodreads, it's classified as book 4.5, which I'm assuming is because that's when she wrote it. She just wrote it after book 4, so that's why they have it in there. But if you go on her website and on Amazon, this is book 0. So I picked it up because I was like, oh, it's the prequel. This has absolutely nothing. Not a single mention in book 1. There was no reason for us to have read this first. I did enjoy it. It was definitely trying a bit too hard at parts, and I was like, okay, that's a little annoying. But I did enjoy it, and I was ready to follow their story, and I was excited to follow their story. But you'll see soon, that did not happen. So I did end up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's really short. It's like 48 pages, I believe. So it's not something that you can really give a star rating to, and I found that kind of difficult because, you know, I wanted to give it a star rating, but it was, you know, 50 pages. It's really hard to try to decipher what you really felt for it, but it did get me really excited to continue on reading their story, so I did want to give it a higher rating. And the next book I read this month was Rebel's Blade by Frostkate. This is the first book in the Army and Feuds series, and let me tell you, this again had absolutely nothing to do with this book at all. Like, you literally didn't have to read it. I'm assuming the characters in this come up in book 3 or 4, which is why you would read this. You definitely don't have to have read it before this one, and this one had so much potential. I was so excited for it. I do have a spoilery reads on this where I'm reading it and I'm giving my thoughts right away. You can see my disappointment really fester up in that book. Let me just say, this book is a blatant lie in marketing. I am a marketing student. I know what I'm talking about. And this was marketed as a fantasy romance. I actually think most of her other books are not marketed as fantasy romance. They're marketed as like fantasy and adventure, but not romance. This one was marketed as romance. When I tell you there wasn't an ounce of romance in this book, I'm not kidding. You can really see this in my spoilery reads. I was frustrated. Another aspect of this is that pretty much all of the men are garbage in this story. They're all some of those people that are like, I know what's best, and they'll like touch you when you don't want it anymore. Like, it's just, oh my god. Again, if you watch the spoilery read, you'll see my thoughts. But I gave this a 3 stars. Here's why. Because I rate on expectations. So for a while, it was at a 4 stars, and then the trash man came, and it dipped, and the story just was not great. It kept dipping. It was at a 2 stars. The ending, although not great compared to, you know, most books that we read, it was, like, I wasn't expecting it to be on par with any of those books. So for what I got, I was really excited about it. And the very last scene in this book was so much fun. I really enjoyed that one. So it did bump it back up to like a 3 stars, but I'd say it's more like a 2.5, 2.75. It was not great. I am definitely not carrying on with the series. It is tragic because I really love these covers. Like, I think they're so beautiful, but the story was not good. The next book I read was on January 12th, and I'm mentioning this for a reason. And it was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. That is right, the first book to the Bridgerton series, which is what the show is based on. And I had been meaning to read this years, months, like way before the show was even announced. But I would put it into my Libby, wait for it. It wouldn't come to me. I'd take it out because I was like waiting for other books, and you know, you can only have 10 at a time. Basically, it just never came down to it. And then I finally got it in January because I think the show came out in December, but I really wanted to read the book first. And I did. I listened to it. It was good to start. It was like a 12 or 13 hour audiobook. Mind you, the last 2 hours was just epilogue. It was the longest epilogue I've ever heard. But yeah, the first part, I'd say maybe like the first quarter to first third, was really good. I was really enjoying it, which is basically before they got married, that part. Then I got so bored. I wanted to DNF it so bad. I was about 5 or 6 hours in, and I was like, oh, I need to turn this off. This is so boring. I was not enjoying it. It just wasn't a good time. So I definitely will not be continuing with the series. We'll see. We'll see if I read the Viscount something. I don't remember what the second book is called. But that's more gonna be based on the show. Because this is what happened. The day after I read this, I went and binged the entire show. I wasn't planning to. I figured I was gonna like Bridgerton because it's Regency and I love those things, but I think the disappointment from the book really, dropped my expectations for the show. I watched that first episode and I was like, oh, it's so much better than the book. So much. There were parts while I was watching the series where the scenes were all there, but like little lines weren't added in, and I'm like, damn. So I think for that aspect, I really do want to read the second book before the second season comes out, because there will be those little scenes. But I'm just like nervous that I'm not gonna enjoy it again, because I gave this book a 2 stars. It wasn't great, but the show will get a 11 out of 10. It was amazing. Now, the reason I gave you the date at the beginning is to show that, first of all, I read all of those books by the 12th of January, but also because on the 13th, I ended up watching the show, and then for a good 10 days after that, I would binge scenes and just not read. And so for 10 days after that, I didn't read anything. So finally, I ended up picking up Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. This was one of my most anticipated. It came out at the end of October. I bought it at the end of November. And then I got really busy in December and I've been pushing it off and finally picked it up. I was so excited. I will say the very beginning of this was so promising. The first like 50 or 60 pages, I was loving it. The ending was also promising. The ending was fun, but also disappointing, and I'm so mad. You don't understand. I also did a spoiler reads on this, and I was so angry. The middle chunk of it, boring. I was so bored out of my mind, which is so weird because, again, this is a mystery, and she does gothic mystery so well. She did Stalking Jack the Ripper, which is one of my favorite series. I love those books. I love Thomas Cresswell and Audrey Rose. Emilia was so annoying. She was so annoying. Wrath was great. But I think a big part of this one was that I saw all those pictures that people did, like the character art, and it was always a romantic scene. And so I was expecting more romance, which if you read the book, there aren't that many scenes with the two of them together. But also, I'm not going to spoil it, but that ending pissed me off. I was so annoyed. I genuinely don't even know if I'm going to read the second book. I feel like I will because I was so annoyed. But at the same time, it comes out in October. I don't know if I'll remember that. I will say, though, a big part of this that I did enjoy is there were little bits of Italian thrown in because they are in Italy, which I didn't know going into it. Again, I don't read synopses. But I did really enjoy that aspect of it. But overall, this was a major disappointment, I think, because of my expectations of Carrie Maniscalco's previous series and the pictures that I had seen of Wrath and Emilia. But overall, just a major disappointment to me. Again, because I was expecting this to be so much better. Technically, rating-wise, it's not that far off from some of the other books that I read, but it was technically better. So I gave this a 3.5 stars, but this was definitely way better than this. Not even a close comparison, way better. But because my expectations for this were like but this one were like high up, they're similar in rating. This one is still lower rating, but like they're similar in rating, and that's why. And the final book I read this month, book number 11, which I finished last night. That is The Darkest Star by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is book number, 20 something of Jennifer L. Armentrout's that I read. I love her books. And this, I wasn't expecting to love it because I already know a few of her different worlds. And I know personally her alien world is not my favorite. Her alien world being the Lux series, the companion standalone Obsession, and this companion series Origin. This world for me is her weakest series. It's just not her best build, so I already didn't have the highest expectations, but I think a big part of that is because it was set in this world, and I just don't think it's done that well, which is funny because I also think it's her most popular of worlds that she has. I just didn't have the absolute best time in this, and I did end up giving it 3 stars. Our main character, Evie, was so annoying. She was so annoying. I did not like her at all. I wanted to punch her in the face sometimes. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Luke. I mean, I enjoyed the story, it just wasn't the best, you know? Which usually for her books, I feel the need to pick up the next one. I don't really feel that need here. I am gonna pick up the next one because it's on hold at the library, so I need to go pick it up. But I don't necessarily feel the need. I'm only gonna do it because I always reach on for Alarm Chat series, so I need to continue on with this one. But I don't really feel that need. So that was it. Those were the 11 books that I read this month. Mind you, I just started school a month ago, so I don't really know how well we're gonna go for the rest of the year, but we started off really well. So yeah, I want to thank you for watching, for joining. I know this is really small channel, by really small, I mean literally no one's here, but thank you for coming if you did, and I'll see you next time.